The greatest epic of India, called The Great India, concerns a dynastic feud between a blind emperor, his children, who are said to be 100, evil embodiments of evil, and his brother's children, who are in number 5. Now these 5 children of the brother, they are models of conduct, propriety, righteousness and truth. The very opposite of the other branch of 100 sons. The number is significantly 5 and 100 to show that in workaday world, evil has always more people than the right. The question came of who is to succeed this blind emperor. And he naturally took the side of his sons. So a battle is proceeding, and his side is about to lose. So he is very much depressed. So he sends for his advisor, who himself is a kind of an illegitimate son of someone. But he is a very wise man. So he comes, the blind king asks him a number of questions. He comforts him, saying that the evil is bound to lose. You shouldn't be sorry if you lose your sons and all that. And then the old king asks some profound questions of life and death. He says, I am not competent to answer these questions, but I can invoke the presence of a divine sage who perhaps could answer your questions. And by spiritual power, he invokes the presence. And the divine sage appears there, Sanat Kumar. And then the king asks him, is there death? And what is death? The sage answers, there is death and there is no death. Then what is death? Death is heedlessness. Each moment you are not attentive, you die. Life is heedfulness, to be attentive, to be aware, to be conscious. That is life. When you fail to do that, negligence, unaware, unconsciousness, that is death. And then the dialogue proceeds. And in that course of that, he enunciates 4 aids for success in spiritual quest, which is ultimately the quest of man. And these 4 aids, as enunciated by him, have been regarded in the tradition as certain fundamentals without which no spiritual understanding, life is possible. The first aid condition, Sri Aurobindo begins his synthesis of yoga with this topic, the four aids. The first describes how for any spiritual discipline, spiritual quest, first you need to have a knowledge of what is it that you are seeking. What is existence? What is God? What are the principles of life? What are the processes? What are the powers based upon those principles that should govern your life? And a body of knowledge which makes you understand these workings, it is called the scripture, the Shastra in Sanskrit. Now, this scripture is something eternal. The supreme scripture lies in the heart of man. The eternal Veda knowledge is there like a closed lotus in the heart. Each experience, each stimulation, each shock acts upon that lotus and it unfolds itself petal by petal. And it is as this inner knowledge unfolds itself that you begin to enter into the dynamics of spiritual life. Usually, some kind of stimulation is required to bring out the concealed, the inner knowledge in man. And that is usually the agency of the word. The word that excites, that releases the inner spring of knowledge. It can come from within or from without. There are some fortunate beings who hear that word from inside. Some have that word communicated to them in a vision or in a dream. But by and large, that word comes from without. Not just one word, but the word stands for a number of words. And that is the scriptures that we know, recording the experiences and the knowledge gathered by those who have gone before us on this path. These are the scriptures that are revered in each tradition, each knowledge. Now, it is not these scriptures that give you really the knowledge. They stimulate and awaken the inner spring of knowledge that is lying in yourself. But it is necessary to utilize these scriptures, read these scriptures, study them, always taking care to enter into identity with the spirit and not become prisoners of the letter of the scripture. Each scripture has what is called a temporal, a local element. Passages, things, describing conditions, conventions, customs, the ways of living, ways of thinking of people in that environment which gave rise to that scripture. Now they are of no consequence to us. Say who are looking at it 2000 years thereafter, they concern and reflect local conditions of that time. But in each scripture, there are some elements which are of perennial relevance. They are eternal truth, and we should exercise our powers of discrimination to put our finger on those truths which are true for all time and apply them in our life. All the while, never be a prisoner of the text that you study. Understand the meaning and the spirit of it. So he says, you study, you assimilate a scripture, but don't be bound by it. Go beyond. No philosophy should bind you. You should understand that every philosophy is a statement in terms of the intellect, of the experience of the person who has a particular experience or a realization. You can share in it, but you are not bound by it. A humanity that comes thereafter, say centuries thereafter, it has to move forward to a larger revelation, a greater experience. Every scripture prepares the human mind for a new scripture, a new statement of a larger truth that is to come. Second, apart from the scripture, there are what are called intellectual formulations, philosophies. We have to understand philosophies for mental clarity. But their province is not spiritual. They may prepare a person for spiritual experience, but by themselves, philosophies do not give. They can only describe. They turn round and round the truth, but they don't touch the truth. In Savitri, I believe there is a line where Sri Aurobindo says of truths, and speaking of philosophy, 1,000 icons they have made of her, but they have not touched the body of truth. We should understand these and utilize scripture, the Shastra, to the extent it is helpful to us. Utilize it to awaken our inner knowledge. Second, you know the science, you know the knowledge, you learn it. You should be sure that you understand it right. And you should always go to those who have studied, who have embodied that philosophy, that teaching, that Shastra. Second is, very few of us can really benefit only by reading a book, only by reading a Bible or a Gita or a Zenda Avesta, things like that. The outer stimulation has to be a living stimulation. Scriptures, they are hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they lose their living force. One needs some kind of stimulation from outside. And that comes by having a living source of inspiration, a living source for the communication of knowledge. And That is provided for in spiritual traditions everywhere, in the concept of a deity, God in a certain form. All religions practically, except perhaps Islam, they give a form. You adore that form, you worship that form, and that relation itself stimulates something inside you. For those, it is difficult again for the majority to worship, to adore, to commune with God who has no form. We conceive of form, but we don't see before us. So tradition provides for what is called an incarnation, that the divine appears in a human form, makes himself accessible and available in human form. We have figures like Krishna, Jesus Christ, Buddha, Rama, and so on, who embody for us the very divine Godhead. We worship, we establish relations, and through them we give. But even these come once in a while, once in thousands, millennia. It is not always that we can draw inspiration from them. And so tradition provides for some of the best men who are regarded as messengers of God. They are the prophets, Moses, Muhammad, so on. They are not incarnations. They are human beings who are inspired, through whom God communicates His message, and they become the teachers. Even if that too becomes old. So tradition provides for a human teacher, a human guide who represents God, who represents the divine. And this institution of the teacher, the Guru, is a very, very old one. Just as the supreme knowledge, the supreme scripture is within, the true teacher, the true Guru is within the heart of each person. Within each one there is a divine indweller, a divine self, and that self is there in all. But how many can really get into touch with that indweller, with that world teacher who is beyond all scripture, who is beyond all form and who can take out any form? So we have a human teacher who embodies in himself the truth of what you seek. And he teaches, but his verbal teaching, his writings, his utterances are the least part of his role in the life of the seeker. It is really his example. He has rendered into his life the truth of the teaching. He shows in his life that it is possible, while remaining in the human body, to realize that state of consciousness of God. And he always communicates an influence. An influence is an effect a person has, seen and unseen, on you by the very fact of his presence. is like a dynamo. There is a continuous emanation of vibrations which go on striking on you, whether you are aware of it or not, and they create certain changes. So a real guru is one who may not teach, who may not speak much. Speaking is the least part, but who is a model, a living example of the truth of the teaching, and who by his very presence goes on influencing those who are open or who come to him or who are exposed to him. His outer contact is not something that should draw attention. It is his inner dynamism that is most important. He never arrogates to himself a commanding position over the community of seekers that come to him. He is a man helping his brothers, a child leading children, a light kindling other lights, an awakened soul awakening others, a power or presence of God calling others to him. He is that. There is the scripture, there is the knowledge, there is the teacher, the guru, who explains, who in his life embodies and who communicates the force of that teaching. Then comes your personal effort. It is very important, particularly at the beginning, that each one has to exert himself, aspire, want with intensity, an intensity that consumes all the petty imperfections, all the petty egoisms and desires that stand in the onward growth of man. And that personal effort is a must. It is, the teaching may be great, the teacher may be great, but unless the effort is put in by us, we do not advance even 1 inch. And this effort, the first step is to have an intense aspiration, a movement to acquire and grow into a new consciousness, away from the limited, desire-bound and ego-bound confines of normal, average workaday life. This intensity of seeking acts like a flame in which all the imperfections are burnt out. And one learns to surrender one's will to the divine will. In the measure in which one surrenders, there is a response from the divine, and there is a descent of grace, of power, of knowledge. God stoops down to second the ascent of man. It is said that if man takes 1 step forward, God takes 2 steps towards him. Because he who chooses the infinite has already been chosen by the infinite. Nobody ever thinks of God unless God has thought already. We think of spiritual life because there has already been an act of grace. Grace does not work according to law, our human law. It is prior to our law. And even in response to our call, our effort, our surrender, our invocation, there is a descent, there is a flow of help from God. Then one has to receive that in oneself. Open the doors in the me and not shutting it out through wrong movements, through movements that lead one away from God, and allow that force, that consciousness to work. And all the while, as one goes on receiving, as one goes on practicing, one has to radiate that consciousness, that change in the life around. One has to communicate the inner gain to the outer environment, so that in the measure in which one perfects oneself, one becomes a center for the radiation of the divine consciousness, and it becomes an ideal divine work. The fourth condition is time. Nobody can achieve things as and when one wants. In all things, there is a cycle of working and an hour of fulfillment. There is a line beyond which human effort cannot go. And this time presents itself either as our enemy, obstruction, or a medium, instrument, or as a friend. If our insistence is an ego, we think and we feel we are doing things, and we want to rush things according to our egoistic preference. Time acts as an obstruction. It creates all kinds of circumstances and difficulties which test your endurance and which don't allow you to run too fast. In the measure in which you surrender to the divine will and make your will one with the divine will, time becomes a medium, an instrument for working out the change. And when you are completely surrendered to the divine, when you become one with his will, then time becomes your servant. Time becomes your friend. One must have, Aurobindo points out, infinite patience, as if one has, and truly one has, all eternity before one to achieve this perfection, this unity with the divine. But also one must bring to bear that energy, intensity, as if we have to realize it the next moment. These are the four aids to whatever the conception of spiritual life, whatever the path, whatever the line. These four are indispensable conditions. The knowledge, the teacher, personal effort, and time. These are called the four E's. You are telling that you have met a theosophical lady. and you discussed reincarnation and other things. Did she speak of any concept which bothered you?
No. On the contrary, she said that there's an Episcopalian minister in this community who is very popular. I know his wife and I know his children, and I have never met him personally. And she said that he too believes in reincarnation, and that he, do you know him, Matt Curran at Christ Church? And she says that he gives his sermons, and they're coming from two levels. And then after the sermon, he goes over and he talks to the people that know what he's really talking about. Yes. And she said, oh, because I was afraid to ask her. I'm always afraid to bring that up with people, like, do you believe in reincarnation? Because most people look at you and go, they think you're crazy in this, in this country. And she said, but of course I do. She said, it's the only way, it's the only answer. And she said, and somehow or another we started talking about this man, and I thought that was really wonderful. And I wonder, you talking about teachers, and the only teacher that I have is Dr. Kleiman here, and I know it's the only teacher that, those of us that are following this. And it disturbed me that as this man has all this knowledge, this Episcopal minister, that he's willing to discuss it with people. Maybe he's just willing to discuss it with people that already have the knowledge, but the fact that he's not spreading it or making other people aware, like Dr. Kleiman does. Of course, Dr. Kleiman's doing in the classroom, and then you have a choice whether to accept it or not. And then I also think of the fact that being that he is the only one here, and what a burden it would be on him. Like, if it was up to me, I'd call him up 10 times a day. I'd have questions, which I do. I sit in class, and so many things. There's so many things that I want to know, and we don't have the teachers in this country like we have in your country, where there seem to be so many people that are willing to guide and instruct. And my God, if Dr. Kleiman were if he were to give his telephone number out, I think the whole town, because I know that I'm not the only one. There's so many people like that. And where does one find these teachers? Where
one teacher helps you to find the teacher in yourself. You understand? Yes. He helps you to a large extent, to a large range. You can find the answers in yourself if you are guided in the right line. So an ideal teacher will always help you to discover ways and means to guide yourself, to find the source of wisdom in yourself. And for that purpose, one teacher in a large area is enough. You understand? He makes you stand on your own legs. He will not keep the stage, of you are having to telephone to him 10 times a day. In the beginning it may be that, but gradually, you will yourself, the moment you frame the question to yourself, the answer becomes clear. Most of us are idle, are lazy. We don't even have the patience to formulate the question clearly to ourselves. I have known many people in the meeting, I don't know how to ask it, they say, and they start talking. Their talking will continue for 5 minutes, and at the end the question will form itself. If we can formulate the question clearly, spontaneously the answer also is formulated the next. So a teacher always teaches to clarify your mental notions. Know exactly what you want to know, and then slowly you begin to find many people, they say we came with so many questions, but by the time we have come to know that we get the answers are clear. There is something within you which responds. The moment you really want to know a thing and you formulate a question, there is an answer from within. Or you are guided to a particular book or particular thing and you will see. So it is not that, there must be an abundant number of teachers.
Well, I excuse me, I worry because I have one more class left with Dr. Klein. And then after that, I just feel, who am I going to turn to? Who will I see him on a daily basis? And though I may not ask all those questions, like you say, yes, he gives you get the answers. He has you read things, and they come from that direction. And I just wonder what it's going to be like, because I don't have enough confidence in myself yet. I am one of those that starts formulating a question, and I don't even know what I'm going to ask.
No, when you are left to yourself, when you are left to yourself, all that he has taught you so long will stand in good state, and it will make you function differently. When you don't have him at close at hand for references, very references. You understand?
Yes.
You begin to think for yourself, you begin to wait for the response, and all that you have learned will come in good state at that time. It is all there, stored in your consciousness. That will press the buttons and things will come up.
Well, I also worry about maybe losing it, about maybe one...
One never loses what one learns. It is always there. The active memory may not restore it to you at your command, but nothing is ever lost. The slightest feeling, the slightest vibration that you have experienced, it is stored in you. You understand? Man loses nothing.
I didn't mean losing the knowledge, I meant losing the enthusiasm that I now have, and the thirst for knowledge and for learning more.
There are always ups and downs. In everybody's life there are ups and downs. They are called days and nights. And it is always a swing. You appear to lose the enthusiasm. That happens when the whole of your being does not participate in that moment of knowledge. It needs to be assimilated. At that time some other parts come up and you feel down, you feel lack of enthusiasm. But that also passes, and once again you have redoubled enthusiasm and a more hunger for these things. But that is to be taken as part of the process. One never has a sustained enthusiasm and ardor all the time. It is unnatural if it is like that.
Oh yeah, I think Dr. Kleiman had mentioned that there was a possibility of perhaps establishing a small ashram or some sort here.
No, I think more immediately what is in the realm of possibility is to start a kind of a study group, study center, study cum meditation center, where regularly twice a month or so to begin with, we will meet and have particular text for study, and all must participate, not just as listeners but actively participate, and then have meditations. That way build a common aspiration, a solidarity of spiritual interests. That creates a community, of mutual help, sharing of divine knowledge, divine progress. And ultimately that can lead to some kind of, a spiritual community. Not necessarily living in a forest. Wherever you may live, you can form a spiritual community. Isn't it? So, something like that. It looks the time has come now in this place to form. There are enough number of sincere seekers and aspirants, those who feel the need. And that shows the time has come. And I do think under his Dr. Clement's leadership, we can really form a movement like this. It's not that everybody must accept Sri Aurobindo and the Mother as the teachers know. The truth of evolution, the truth of divine consciousness. One is not asked to cease to be a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu. One can be. But this is a psychological way. To be cheerful, to be bright, to be looking at the good side of things. You can belong to any religion. But there is a technique of doing it that one has to learn. Isn't it? Instead of going to psychiatrists and delivering oneself in half-baked hands, this kind of self-disciplining, learning to observe oneself, spot out the things to be corrected, mutual consultations, comparing of notes, this could be a vigorous movement towards self-fulfillment.
Sure, Pandit. I want to talk about days and nights, and more about nights than days. I noticed in New York, 2.5 years ago, I went through something in this country that Connie brought up the other night, which is called ISA, Institute for Self-Actualization. It's along the lines of best that's going on out in California. As a matter of fact, the man that started it here was participated in this for many years. And I did that for quite a long time, and I still am involved in a lot of the things that they do and participate with them. And I got a tremendous amount of value. As a matter of fact, that was the opening to me. I mean, it has had more impact on me in the area of awareness and consciousness than anything. I mean, I was totally, didn't even know what the two words meant before I did it. And I know that I have experienced many more happy days than that, what I call ups and downs. It's kind of like this. When you experience those down days, I mean, there are days when I don't understand myself at all. I mean, a side of me that comes out, I call it the ugly. I take it out on everybody around me, and I feel a lot of anger, and I don't even understand that side of me. And I want to know if you have a answer possibly what you can do during this time, or if you can. But the thing is, the problem I also see, and as a matter of fact, the answer kind of came to me as I said it. It's like I don't even realize, though, at that time that I'm doing it. You know what I mean? It's like I have no control of it.
Yes.
And I want to know what it is that I can do to maybe control that anger or the hostility or the ugliness that comes out during those times.
That the fact that you are aware of it at that time, that you are passing through that period, that cycle, shows that things can be brought under control. First thing is to make yourself ineffective at that time, not to take decisions and to avoid taking on important assignments at that period, because usually whatever you do, it goes wrong at that time. So if as far as possible to shut yourself from serious occupations at that time. And when you do that, you limit the capacity for mischief, negative impact on the society, on others. And when you observe yourself that movement slows down. When you lose yourself in that moment, it gathers speed. But you just observe yourself. I know that I'm in a bad mood now.
And it seems to go on all day, you know,
Yes,
and you know, I can think of it and want to control it, and it just...
Yes. It is just to lie low at that time. What they call to lie low, you know. And generally it comes in cycles, maybe 3 days. Each person has his own cycle. And it does happen. And there is a line in Savitri, I believe, 1 idiot hour spoils, isn't it, Rand? 1 idiot hour ruins centuries of work. Something like that, man's foolishness, you know. That is what we undo things in a minute. You know what it has taken hours to build. So you have to lie low, and you must sincerely want to eliminate that from you. But as long as you feel there is some justification for these things, that they are unjustified and they should not be there. So even if you are weak, you will get the strength once you recognize that it should not be there.
I notice the days are fewer and fewer.
The more your inner strength grows, the more your will becomes clear. You know, the less and less these things will repeat themselves. But in this country, there is some feeling, you know, that if you control, if you suppress, you know, you are opening the doors for many psychological disorders. So you must give free rein to whatever you feel, remove all inhibitions. And that is a dangerous philosophy. You know, things never work out like that.
I'm sorry, I went away for a minute. Would you repeat that again?
That there is a trend of thinking, you know, among psychiatrists, certain so-called encounter groups, you know, who say, break down all inhibitions, indulge in whatever moment comes, and your problems are solved. So if you have a moment of anger, become angry. Feel violent, hit out. Somebody was telling me his force became so violent and he had nobody to beat. So he was asked to take a knife and cut through papers. Paper, you know, newspapers he would cut. He expressed his anger, his violent movement. If you feel sexy, be sexual. And it never works. The truth of the matter is,
that does not work to do that.
It does not work. What happens? That movement strengthens in itself. Each time you indulge in a movement, that movement gets double force to come next time. You understand?
Surely.
If I start, you know, indulging in sex the moment I have sex desire, next time the sex desire will be doubly powerful. They are wrong who say that when I indulge, I will have spent it out. No. Something gathers in the subconscious. And next time, again, with the greater confidence it comes. So in breaking down inhibitions, we are going down in our consciousness rather than expanding.
It is then to work on controlling.
Yes. And to control, the first step is to suppress. After a series of suppressions, you reject it. It loses force. But by indulging in it, you never, you know, weaken that moment.
I had a real bad day yesterday, I think it was. And I took a walk, you know, I was really trying to get it under control, and I went for a walk on the beach and came back, and it still was just coming up. And I really had a tough time with it.
Usually, you know, an alternate manual occupation, occupying yourself with something which absorbs your energies, that is good. If you have a psychological difficulty, occupy yourself in a manual occupation, gardening or cleaning the house or some such thing, Immediately the attention is shifted and it loses force. But if you are alone, if you brood over it, it gets greater hold on you. You begin to see things more and more dark.